Mick Schumacher has decided to make a surprising switch in his career by joining Alpine in the WEC's Hypercar class in 2024. And while this means that his chances to join F1 have reduced vastly in the following years, it's not the end of his Formula 1 career after all. Mick is still the reserve driver for Mercedes, and with all of his impact on how the W14 was set up in the first half of the season, there are still many doors open for the young German driver. But with a lot of promising talent coming down the line, is this a challenge that Mick will find difficult to overcome? And if so, how is this going to affect his potential future career in F1? It goes without saying that Mick Schumacher was one of the brightest talents in the sport before joining F1 in Haas, as many felt like the American team had done quite the injustice with how they handled the entire situation when he failed to perform. During his first year, he had Nikita Mazepin as his teammate, and while managing to completely outperform the Russian driver, Mick has gained a reputation as a driver who desperately needs a competitive car. But once he was paired with Magnussen in 2022, it became obvious that he would struggle to score points on a regular basis, especially after the Dane finished 6th in the first race in Bahrain. Mick has caused quite some severe damage to the car on a variety of occasions, such as in Imola and Monaco, and that's been elaborated in Steiner's book as one of the main reasons why he was let go and replaced with Hülkenberg, who hadn't been in a proper F1 seat for 3 full years. Be that as it may, Mercedes have taken care of the son of Michael, the driver who paved the way for the Brackley-based squad, along with Lauda, and helped them build the right car for their run of 8 championships. However, Mick's role was limited to being the reserve driver in Mercedes, and while this is not a role we should be underestimating, considering how much praise he kept receiving from Wolff, it was not the ideal goal of the young German driver. Toto Wolff tried to lobby for him multiple times in the openings that Williams had, and at a certain point, Mick was also related to AlphaTauri as well. Nonetheless, nothing of that worked, and it seems like the only logical solution for the German driver would be to join another competition, and this time, it's not related to Mercedes. Although many believe it was speculation at first, it turned out to be the reality of the entire situation, as Mick signed a deal with Alpine's Hypercar program in 2024. Luckily for Mercedes and the entire F1 sport, he's still keeping the role as the reserve driver in the team, but it will be in his back plans as his primary focus will be to prove that he can still be a legitimate and valued member of a team. Regarding his latest challenge, Mick went on to say, "A new chapter is beginning for me with Alpine in the FIA WEC Hypercar category. The car is impressive and I can't wait to get started. I've grown up with single-seaters, so driving a car with a closed cockpit and covered wheels is a great opportunity to hone my driving skills. I sorely miss racing this year. It's what I've loved to do since I was a kid, and it was sometimes difficult to watch the other drivers take to the track. Endurance racing is a new challenge for me, and I'm sure we'll share great moments together next year with Alpine." Most obviously, Mick will keep himself warm for any kind of opportunity that arises in F1. As we saw in the past, there's always chances in which drivers can be called up and fulfill a position, with the opportunity to impress the team and receive a seat in some of the upcoming seasons. That was the case with Nick de Vries, who was the reserve driver for Mercedes and its affiliated teams ever since he won the F2 championship back in 2019. And up until his first real racing experience with Williams last year in Monza, he had to satisfy with what Mercedes had to offer him, which was mostly in the Formula E category. Nonetheless, Nick had to meet the terrible side of being a driver in the AlphaTauri, or more precisely the Red Bull environment. And although Mick has 2 full seasons under his belt as an F1 driver and is nowhere near comparable with Nick in this regard, it's still kind of hard to come back in the sport after you took time out for a considerable amount of time. Hülkenberg has proven that even 3 years can mean nothing if you have the willpower to complete a comeback in the sport. But then again, experience was the deciding factor as to why Haas made the choice to replace Mick with his older compatriot. Talking about their future together, the VP of Alpine Motorsports, Bruno Famin, went on to say, "With Philippe Sinor, the team principal, we wanted drivers who are not only fast and reliable, but also showing a real team spirit and good racing acumen to best represent the Alpine colours in the premier category of the World Endurance Championship. It might be Schumacher's first foray into endurance, but his enthusiasm for the project and his will to join us are palpable. I'm sure he'll be a real asset." What many seem to forget is that Mick is not an incompetent driver when it comes to championships outside of F1. He did win the F3 and F2 championships, and he did have a bright future ahead of him. But sometimes, when you find yourself in the wrong place at the wrong time, situations like this can and will happen. This is something that persuaded Alpine's WEC team to pursue a driver of his caliber. And we don't have to look that further away when it comes to drivers who failed to stick it into Formula 1 for a longer period of time, but then again managed to make it in another racing championship, such as the case with Giovinazzi and the Le Mans 24 Ferrari project. But if Mick is to make a return to F1 at a certain point of his career, then it seems like he'll have to deal with a lot of personal improvement with Mercedes, and although the reserve driver role would not be a priority for him, something he's done with a lot of effort and passion in 2023, it would play a vital role of whether or not there will be an opportunity for Mercedes to vouch for him again at some point down the line. As of now, the seat of Sargent is very likely to be secured for 2024, and even if it's not, Vowles has been loud and clear when it comes to whether or not Mick would be the replacement for the American driver. However, there is only so much patience that Williams would have with Logan if he continues to underperform, and there is always the opportunity of Mick jumping in one of the Mercedes affiliated teams at some point down the line, even though the McLaren and Aston Martin seats are more or less guaranteed for the long-term future of the drivers. Still, once a Formula 1 driver, always a Formula 1 driver. And although Mick is someone who has a lot of willpower to get back to the ultimate racing category, there is still the opportunity for him to gain as much racing experience as possible with Alpine in the WEC. And maybe wait for a future brawl between Ocon and Gasly, to the point of one of the Frenchmen having to leave the team. Elaborating on this matter even further, Famin went on to say, "He's still a Mercedes reserve driver, and he has a very long experience, a very good experience of what is a top-level F1 team. He will bring us some ideas, some methodologies. The test in Jerez was made for him to learn this kind of car because he made his career so far with open-wheel cars. It was for him to discover the endurance world. It was him to own his mind to know if he would be happy to have a full program with Alpine or not. That's why we didn't organise a test with 5 or 10 guys. The conclusion we can take from tests is very limited." With this in mind, the future of Schumacher is really one of the most interesting topics that we can talk about in the upcoming period. And even though there is a contract with WEC, Famin was loud and clear that if the opportunity for Mick arises to replace Lewis or George, then that is the priority path that the German driver will choose. So, what do you think about Mick's choice to go to the WEC? Do you think that this will become a distraction for him to chase a career in another motorsports category, or do you think it will actually help him to prove a point to the world that he's an unbruised diamond by providing a lot of help for Alpine? Well, let us know in the comments down below.